Hi, good morning. This is Anne-Marie from the Paragraph Challenge. Welcome no matter what time you're joining us. So maybe it's morning, maybe it's afternoon, maybe it's evening. And I work with adults and children who are dyslexic, dyspraxic, dyscalculic, ADD, ADHD. I've written a couple of books. One is called A Bridge Between Two Me's. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, it's about my journey in education as a Davis facilitator over 20 years. And the other one is Healthy Mind, Healthy Body, which I wrote during lockdown for my teenage clients, really, because they were going from a situation of not being in school. Some were going from units of 5 children into a big school, maybe with 1,000, and they weren't going to succeed with the tools that they had. And then I realized, well, that most teenagers don't have the tools that they need because they spend too much
Mhm.
time sitting indoors, not out in the sunshine, not communicating with each other. And there's so many different things that you need so that you can function, I suppose, physically and mentally in a good way.
Mhm.
So today I am delighted to welcome a lady called Justina Asafu-adjaye. And Justina has a long career in education. So I'm going to let Justina introduce herself, talk a little bit about what she does, and we'll take it from there. So, welcome, Justina.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Anne-Marie.
I'm
Thank
absolutely
you.
delighted. So, at the moment, Justina is involved in a school in Ghana called Nature Sprout Academy. And so, if you're watching or if you're listening, you need to go and check it out on the website because it's a stunning looking school. And Justina tells me that the videos and the photos don't do it justice, which is very surprising because it looks amazing. So if it's even nicer than that, I want to go to Ghana to go to school. So
You are
Justina,
so welcome.
um, can you give us a little bit of background about like what it is, where you came from before you got to Nature Sprite Academy?
Yeah, no problem. So my background is in education, working with children, families, and young people. And I've been working in that field for about 35 years now within the UK. I'm a qualified teacher and a previous head teacher. So I went from early years. I started in early years, worked my way through as a volunteer, um, got up into management, worked in Sure Start Children's Centres, and then I became an area Senko. And as an area Senko, I supported nurseries within a local authority to support them around inclusive practice and um, just best practice in supporting children with special educational needs and disabilities. And alongside that, I've always been an advocate within my community as well. So supporting parents navigate their SEND journey. And then I moved into secondary education and became a head teacher of an alternative provision. And that provision was primarily for children who were experiencing educational crisis. And we very quickly became a specialist centre for children with special educational needs because what we realized was the vast majority of the students coming through our door had undiagnosed and unrecognized needs, which was contributing towards their school breakdowns. And so we became a specialist centre, therapeutically informed, multidisciplinary, aimed at taking the child through the journey of recognition, assessment, identification, getting them an education healthcare plan and supporting them to move to the next chapter of their journey. And I did that for just under 6 years. And then I got to a crossroads and I thought, okay, we've been doing this for a while. So within inclusion, it was about 20 years. Within education, it's 35. What
Right.
do you want to do with yourself now? And my background, my family background and heritage is Ghana. Both my parents were born in Ghana, and I've been going back and forth to Ghana many, many times throughout my life. And I realized that I just really wanted to give something back to my
Great.
homeland, share
Okay.
my experience. And so I made the decision that I was going to go back and impact the SEN world in Ghana through training, education, volunteering, and then I met the owner of a school that was about to open, and she wanted a transition school for children to be able to who had special educational needs or disability, to have a space that they could come, um, access resources, therapy, education, and prepare them to move on to mainstream education. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's literally what I've left behind. But this is now in Ghana. How can I be involved? And so I came on board as a consultant in the setup, and then transitioned to the programs coordinator. And there, as the programs coordinator, I'm responsible for designing the programs that the children come onto. I lead on training and development for the professionals that work in the field, and just overseeing the whole experience for the children and the families, to making sure that they get what they need, what they're coming for. So all our programs are individualized. So each child has their own program based on their needs, based on what the family are wanting for them, based on the child's presentations. And we work with them, with the goal that we will get them to whatever the appropriate space is for them in order for them to move on to the next chapter of their journey. So for some children, they go on to be homeschooled. Some children, they go to mainstream school. Um, some children, it's preparing them for adulthood because they're now of an age where there isn't an appropriate school for them to be at. And so what support can we put in place? So that's literally my background and my journey and how I came to be at Nature
Very,
Sprout Academy.
and Nature Sprite Academy, how long is it in existence?
So we've been open just over a year.
Okay.
So we're still very new. It's amazing how much we've grown in that year, which has been fantastic. So we're just over a year. We have currently just under 40 students that we're working with. Um, and as I said, each family is unique. So every family's needs looks different. And we
Yeah.
work very, very closely and collaboratively with the families because it's really about empowering them in how they support their young person and making sure their voices are heard.
Yeah, I mean, it's so true because even when I work with students, the like because I do Davis programs and in addition to the extra work that I do with like mental health, and like some parents come along and go, oh yes, so they've done the week and like are they fabulous now? And obviously the kids have improved a lot, but sometimes it's the parents that need to change more than the children. And like they
Yeah.
expect to just drop them off and like they like quickly talk to you for a few minutes and then go. And they're like, oh, sit still. And I was thinking, well, like, no, that's not what I ever say. Don't say sit still. And because if they're moving, there's a reason that they're moving. And so
Yes.
do children spend different lengths of time at Nature Sprite Academy depending on what they need?
Yes, absolutely. So we review their placement every 3 months to look at, what's working, what's not working, what's the next step needs to be. But we do daily feedback with the families, so we don't have to wait for 3 months. But in a program, we ask that you give it minimum of 3 months commitment so that we can really see impact. And so some children will stay for 3 months, some will six. We've had children who just graduated who've done a year.
Hmm.
So every child will be different.
Yeah, I mean, that's really nice because, like you said, I mean, even outside of the whole Sen community, I think each child is very different and requires like very different help. And they're different every day, aren't they? Like some days they might be feeling like really happy, and then like for some children, like their threshold is very, very low compared to other children can tolerate a lot of stress and confusion before,
Mm,
they get really overwhelmed. Or other kids, it could be something very low level. It might, oh, somebody might look at them the wrong way or just say a passing remark and their whole day is destroyed. Um, and so the Nature Sprite Academy, is that privately funded or is it state funded?
yeah, it's privately funded.
Privately
It was
funded.
actually set up by a parent.
Okay.
So it was set up by a parent who has an autistic child. And when she first started the journey of exploration, of looking at actually, I think something is going on here. I'm not quite sure what it is. My child isn't developing in the same way that my other children developed. Um, I think I need some assistance and some information. And what she did was she started a journey of searching for support, assistance, information, um, literally educated herself online. And what she was finding was she was coming across services, but they weren't really what she was looking for in terms of what they were offering or the space they were being delivered in. And so she ended up connecting with somebody in South Africa, connecting with someone in America who came on board and helped her develop a holistic program for her child, which looked at their biomedical profile and also looked at applied behavior analysis. So they created this program for her child, and she was able to get her child from being pre-verbal, non-engaged, unable to kind of build relationships with
Sure,
the
yeah.
household, to the space where he was actually now conversational, able to go to mainstream school without assistance, engaging in day-to-day activities that other children take for granted. And she wanted to recreate that for other families so they didn't have to reach to South Africa or America. They could find everything they needed in one space in Ghana. So within Nature Sprout Academy, all the modalities of therapy are under one roof. So we have speech and language, we have occupational therapy, we have behavior therapy, we have music therapy, we have animal therapy, we have art therapy, and we have academics. In our younger years, they're play-based learning, and in our
Sure.
older years, they're vocational curriculums. So very much hands-on
Practice.
learning,
Yeah.
skills-based learning, because we recognize that, we are wanting to prepare our young people to engage in the world around them,
Yeah,
and we're
absolutely.
wanting to upskill
Yeah.
them.
Yeah,
So,
my youngest daughter went to a Montessori primary school until she was 10. And I mean, she absolutely loved it because, it's a similar type of ethos. It's all about, the child is child-centered and you follow your own interest. But then at 10, there wasn't enough children to go on. There was only going to be two. And so
right.
even though she loved the school, you do need a certain amount of social interaction. But when she went to primary school, gosh, it was a culture shock. And I remember the principal saying, "Oh, they're just, what's the word? More or less that they're not used to integrating with people and all," which is totally untrue. My daughter could
Mm,
integrate with anybody.
yeah.
She actually lives in London now. But what it was like the kids were actually bullying each other and it was like deemed as normal. Whereas the kids from the
Oh,
Montessori school, nobody ever
yeah.
bullied Eddie because it just wasn't tolerated. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like they used to
Yeah.
say, sit down, have a conversation. They had conversation
Yeah.
chairs. Kids would chat to each
Yeah.
other, stuff like that. But in the other school, it was like, oh my God, the bullying was like awful. So she never really enjoyed education after that. So I homeschooled her. Well, she homeschooled herself, I have to say, because Montessori kids have a completely different mindset. Like she'd been there from 3 to 10, so she could teach herself anything if it
Yeah.
interested her. So
Yeah.
ended up going to college in the UK, but like she got into 7 colleges and did GCSEs at
Amazing.
13. So you know,
Amazing.
but it's not that there was like that she was hyper intelligent. It was just that she had, grown as naturally and developed all her own skills herself. And but
Mm,
like one of the things that really bothered her when she started secondary school that lasted 3 months, was the amount of bullying not directed at her, but directed at other people. And some of these kids were students of mine, which she then
mm,
felt, oh, I'm like, she felt responsible nearly because, well, this girl goes to my mom and she's very nice. Why are they picking on her type,
mm.
But so that is why she didn't last long. And what it would be is there a typical age children come, or what's the youngest students that you take, Justina?
So we take children from 15 months. So in Ghana, children start school very, very early. So we don't really have a defined early years in the way that we have like within the UK and
Yeah,
like in the Western world. So children and our maternity period is 3 months in Ghana. So
right,
children
okay.
can start nursery from as young as 3 months. We don't
Mhm.
have childminders and things like that in Ghana. But we take them from 15 months because we believe that that's an appropriate age that we can start to kind of engage them in, you know, play and
Yeah,
developmental activities. So from 15 months and right up until adulthood, so 18, although we don't have any really at the top end of that age. So our oldest students right now that we have are about 12.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
we
mean
take them.
that's a great age, isn't it? 12, because
Yeah.
it's before they develop like all these terrible hang-ups that teenagers have now and all stuck to their phones. I mean, I can see it even in my extended family, like they're so attached to devices that they actually can't function without them. But they don't want to go to school either because they don't want to leave the things behind. It's yeah,
Yeah,
a
yeah,
major problem. Yeah, and I
yeah.
can see what you're saying about the 15 months because I have two grandchildren who are 18 months and my
Mm,
granddaughter can dress herself. But I said to my daughter, it's like kids of this generation are developing quicker and quicker and quicker because
yeah.
like even when she speaks very fluently, she runs around, but she can do anything. She can put like things that my daughter was doing in Montessori at 3, like she put tiny
Hmm.
things into, she can lift the rice, but and I was going but if kids are left, I suppose, to develop and you give them things, then they love it.
Yeah, yeah.
She gets very irritated if you try to help her put her shoes on, like, but sometimes by
Oh, that's
half an hour.
amazing. That's amazing.
Um,
It is about the stimulation, and it is
yeah,
around kind of the environment and what you provide for them. I think it's really important that you give them space to explore,
yeah,
investigate. They're the key skills for learning. And I think sometimes people really forget that they're actually the skills for learning are not tied to knowledge and
no,
quantities of knowledge. Experiential learning, um, giving them the skills of inquisition, with inquiry, curiosity, you know, comparing all of those things. If they have those skills, they can apply it to any knowledge base that you give
sure.
them. But if they don't know how to do those things, how to question, then they're just stuck with just absorbing loads of information that
But
isn't really relevant to
yeah, it's
them.
not relevant, and they don't have any connection to it. I mean, my grandson, he lives next door to me. On
Oh, I love that.
yeah, my son built a two-bedroom cabin for him and his girlfriend and the baby. So like he comes out every day and like he feeds the fish and then he goes and feeds
Mm,
the chickens and he comes into my
yeah,
house. And yesterday he has one of those little tyke cars and it had rained. So he came in the back door and there was a towel on the ground, picked up the towel, went out, dried the car for himself.
yeah,
And he knows how to feed the dogs, like he gets the stuff and he puts it in their
yeah,
bowls. So,
yeah,
yeah. And one of my students said to me, your grandchildren are so lucky to come here with all these animals. I'm going, yeah,
yeah,
it's like a zoo,
absolutely.
but it is very beneficial. And I didn't grow up with any animals because my dad didn't like them. So my husband had to convince me to get our first dog. But at one stage we had 5 dogs, and then my son just actually he started collecting animals during COVID. He was, I think, very bored, so he started learning all about marine biology, and he has
Mm,
catfish that are like 5 feet long that he grew from like this
wow,
size, and but I
wow.
mean, it's a huge amount of extra work. And he's dyslexic, but he works in like marine support. So he was in a lady's house last week at a pond and she was chatting away and she goes, when did you get your ADHD diagnosis? And he says, I never got an ADHD diagnosis.
I
I
love
was
it.
only ever diagnosed as dyslexic. Yeah, but then she said, oh, I worked in education for 30 years, blah, 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 blah. And then she said something like awful. She said to him, yeah, so I mean, there's two types of people who are ADHD. There's the ones that are very high level, blah, blah, blah. And then there's the other ones that are only interested in certain things and then very dumb in other areas. And he goes, okay. And she goes, and that's probably you. Now, luckily, my son is used to being, because a lot of my students are autistic and ADHD, like they're all very different. Some of them are very blunt. And obviously, at 31, navigating the world as dyslexic, he's used to stupid people. But like, he was going, I just looked at her and he goes, I just didn't respond because he goes,
Wow.
point. But I was going, there's the people who are just dumb in some areas. I was going, wow.
Oh my gosh. And you know what? It's so interesting though, because that speaks so well to our education system and how we view neurodivergent people, right? Like we are so convinced that there's only one way of being, that anything outside of that one way of being is deemed as, dumb or weird or not
Yeah.
quite. And it's such a shame, and I really look forward to the time when our educators really wake up and realize the value and the beauty that is neurodiversity, and change their language to be able to recognize and accommodate that, because luckily your son he sounds like someone with really good resilience and self-awareness and emotional intelligence. So he was able to receive that and not affect him. But,
Yeah.
imagine the amount of young people that would hear something like that, that would be so devastated to know that somebody that they potentially respect has that kind of view of them and their capability. Like, such a shame.
Yeah, I mean, suppose it's fortunate because he's 31. If someone said that to him when he was 18, it would have had a very different impact on him. And not only that, he was fortunate he went to a nice school. I
Mm,
did lots of work with him, so sometimes he'd be digging the garden and I'm reading out the notes. He actually did extremely well in school. He didn't study at all,
mm,
but the thing people forget is you don't learn just sitting at a desk sometimes. So
yeah.
all the information was always in his head. I mean, he was very good at physics, and people always go, "Oh, very good at physics." He got an A in physics in his last exam.
Mm,
But they think, well, if you're dyslexic, you're not going to get an A. But I mean, physics is a practical subject. We just don't teach it very practically. So he went
yeah.
to my dad, who's an engineer, because he didn't even pass his exam in the mocks. But then in the final exam, he got an A. So it went from an E to an A in 6 weeks because
Wow.
he went to my dad once a week. So I think 6 hours. And all my dad did was show him all how all the things worked, the electronics and all. But,
Mhm.
it demonstrates that the information was in his head. He just didn't know how to get it out.
Yes.
But there's lots of kids, like you said, out there who don't have family support or whose parents just don't have the skills. And then they send them off to school with the hope that the people in the school do have the skills. And then very
Yeah.
often that's not what happens. They're
At
just
all.
not in the
At
right
all.
place. No,
Yeah. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
just
And I
do
think that's
it
why,
wrong.
yeah. Sorry. I was going to say, I think that's why it's amazing the work that you do, um, the work that Martin does, the work that all of us within the Sen community do, because that community needs to grow, because we need to be able to share with educators that, the one way that you've been taught isn't the only way. There are other ways, and actually you're missing such huge potential in your students by not opening up yourselves to look at a different way
Sure.
of
And it's
teaching.
not, it's not even that expensive. It's
No.
it's just you have to think differently. It's
Yeah.
like going back 100 years and undoing all the who decided we all needed to sit down for like 5 or 6 hours.
Hours, yeah. Like, what benefit does that actually do?
Because I
And
have
it's about, yeah, just
and our school days are so long as well. I think that's
they're really long, and they've really cut back so much on, playtimes are shorter now, lunch times are shorter,
sure.
all
Yeah.
the times for actually, it's really funny because I'm a homeschooler as well. And the first thing that anyone ever says to you, but what about socialization? What about the
Oh, no.
socialization? And actually, if you look at school, they have removed 90% of the opportunities to actually socialize in a natural way don't exist in a school, you
No, they
know.
don't. I used to have an
And
hour for my lunch when I was in school, but now it's down to 30
it's
or
like 30
35
minutes,
minutes.
40 minutes if
And
you're
you have to go to
lucky.
the toilet, eat your lunch, and the kids are stuffing the food in because they
Yeah,
have very short time, and then they
yeah,
will
it's
try
very
to.
functional.
Yeah,
Yeah. So actually the social skill of sitting down, eating together, speaking, sharing information, learning like the social etiquettes of mealtime, they don't exist in schools.
no,
Most children are eating standing up, they're eating walking because they don't have enough time. Most of their lunchtime is taken up queuing for the food. Um, they have very, very little time. They have very, very little opportunities to actually physically, exert themselves in a way that is very natural for children and very needed for children. So we're in some ways we're adultifying children more and
yeah,
more in school, but and not catering to their natural developmental process, and not recognizing that actually they would learn so much more if we stopped sticking them on a chair at a desk for
yeah,
an hour at a time,
yeah. Because
cramming loads of information into their heads.
one of the things that I do and that all my colleagues do is like we recognize the importance of the child being able to balance really well, and it's the same thing in Montessori and all. Like if they can't stand on one leg or they can't walk, and but like kids will naturally climb and do all that stuff themselves without you organizing them to do it. But that's not something that they do in schools. You know,
Hmm.
anyone who hasn't got good back, like there was one child who was a friend of my daughter's in the Montessori school, and he was running around. I was watching him, and I said to his mom, "Oh, I think you're." I knew her well. I think your son is dyspraxic, and she said, "Oh, how do you know?" And I said, "Well, like he's walks like with his head a little bit sideways, and he was a little bit awkward, and I'd seen him swimming." But like she went, but nobody else would have told her. He was only 5, but I mean, he
Mm,
did really well because I told her that she went and she did different exercises and stuff with him. But that people don't realize that those small changes make a difference academically as well.
yeah,
That, you know, your physical body impacts the way that you develop academically. And I think that that's not
absolutely.
something. And it's like if I went into a Montessori classroom, I could tell straight away which were the dyslexic kids, which were
Hmm.
the dyspraxic, which were didn't, you know, were dyscalculic. And I remember saying this to the teacher, and she said, "Oh, well, how do you know?" And I said, "Well, it's very obvious in a Montessori setting more than in a classroom." I said, "Because you can tell by what the kids are naturally drawn to and what they like avoid doing. So
Yeah,
if they don't understand maths, they won't choose to do the maths work. They'll choose the,
yes,
you know, so, you know, it just,
yes,
it's, you know, now we wait till kids are like 8, 9, 10, and they're so far
yeah,
behind. And then you're giving them more academics rather than what you're
yeah,
doing over in Ghana, where you're like looking at the holistic child and how are they
absolutely.
developing? Because I think the emotional development is so much more important that
Absolutely.
if you don't, you know, develop that first, then kids don't have the skills to learn anything because their
Yeah,
emotions are very, you know, they're uncomfortable. They don't know how to regulate, like you said.
absolutely, absolutely. When I do staff training, it's one of the things that I really hone in that if you understand the emotional development as the foundational blocks of the individual, and and I liken it to building a house. If you build a house and your foundation is not strong, what will happen? They said, oh well, it's there's a risk it will topple, things will break, it won't be enough. And I say, but for our children, it's even more critical because if we don't build those emotional building blocks for them, it's much, much harder. Where do they get the resilience to try, when they're fixing a puzzle and it's not
Sure.
working, where do they get the skills to keep trying rather than throwing it across the room because it's not working, or igniting a meltdown? And because the majority of our students are pre-verbal, and so it's really important that we allow them space and time and the tools and the support to develop these things, because they're not always able to articulate in spoken word what their needs are. And so we need to be really intuitive to what they're communicating through their body language, through their choices, like you said. Where do they gravitate towards? What do they like? What gives them joy? What does their joy even look like? Because their joy isn't expressed in the way that a typical child might do, through saying, oh my gosh, look at this. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. You know, their joy isn't always expressed like that. Their joy might be expressed through their stimming, through, the fact that they spend more time in that particular area. So I think one of the things that I'm really passionate about is, let's look at the child as a whole, and let's look at what contributes towards the behaviors that we're seeing. What are the behaviors telling us? And then what can we do to support the behaviors we want to see, and what can we do to support the prevention of the behaviors we don't want to see? But how do we see that child in their entirety? That holistic picture of that child, it can't just be based on the academics. It cannot,
I
I mean,
know. And I think,
academics shouldn't
yeah,
even come into the equation until way down the line.
yeah.
um
But I think once people are functioning well emotionally and they're feeling happy, they're more likely to learn stuff. Do you know what I mean? So
yes,
if your emotions are all over the place, I mean, you're spending so much time trying to and energy going, you know, trying to control your emotions that there isn't any space in your mind to learn
yeah,
anything.
yeah,
But I have a couple of students who obviously, well, most of them don't like going to school for obvious reasons, but some, the reason is not the academics, but the parents just don't see that. The reason is more
Mm,
linked to anxiety and separation anxiety from
yes.
their mums. So they're very attached to their mums. And like,
Yeah.
you really need to solve that first before you worry about can they learn to read? Because I mean, they can learn to
Yes.
read. I can. It's not that hard to teach a child to read. People think it is. It's
Mm,
definitely not. I've taught loads of kids who are. I've one student who's 18, and shockingly, he when he came to me, he couldn't read a single thing. He wasn't even at junior infants level. But
yeah.
his mom had taken advice from a school when he was 12 to send to a special school, my pet hate. Anyway, but this child is ADHD. He doesn't have any other issues, so it was not the right environment for him. But he hasn't
Mm,
developed at all, even, socially or otherwise. He's extremely nice. He's extremely talented. He goes out to my garden and goes, "Oh, this area is a mess." And he clean it all up in an hour for me. And his mom is very happy with that. Other people will be like, he didn't learn anything. And I'm thinking, well, of
yeah.
course he did, because we were working on like concepts like change and consequence. And, that's very
Yeah.
useful. If something's a mess and you clean it up, well, that's
Yeah.
change. And he's very good at anything to do with physically. But last week we'd been reading a book that was specially written for dyslexics. And then he said to me, "Do you mind if we read a different book?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And like, he picked a Roald Dahl book. And like, the difference, he could read the book perfectly. The words weren't easy,
Yeah.
and the words were closer together than the one that was supposed to be written for the dyslexic child.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be geared towards teenagers. And I said, "Why is that easier?" And he goes, "Because it's a kid's book." So in his mind, because it was titled a kid's book, it meant it was easier to
Yeah.
read.
He could act. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that
But
amazing?
but in this, he's fantastic, and he used to have a very short fuse. And he was in a playground recently, and a much younger boy, he's very tall, much younger boy threw a scooter at him, and he turned around and he said, don't do that again."
Amazing. Look at that.
And then the boy, of course, what did he do? He threw it at him again, and he turned around and he said, "I did hold on to his shirt." And I said to him, "I asked you not to throw it again, and you
Yeah.
threw it at me
Yeah.
again." He said, "The next time you'll throw it at the wrong person." He said,
Hmm.
um, and he said, "You're going to end up in trouble." He goes, "I'm not going to touch you because I'm much older than you, but someone else."
Yeah.
And he walked off, and then he said to me, "I was
That's
so proud of
amazing.
myself." He goes, "Because I was in control." Now, I never even said
Yeah.
this to this boy. He said, "Once you don't lose your temper, you're in control of the situation."
Yeah. Oh, amazing.
Yeah. So,
Amazing.
I
I,
mean,
so for me, coming because my school was predominantly for children with social emotional mental health needs.
sure. Yeah.
So for me, hearing that, I can see that that is huge. Somebody else might hear that and think, well, that's what he should have done. But when you struggle to regulate your emotions and you're able to develop that skill set, that self-awareness, to be able to manage your own emotions, but still have enough that you can actually speak to the other person to help them to regulate and manage their behavior, that is
Yeah.
huge, huge.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know him, but I'm so proud for him.
I'm
I
going to
love
play in
that.
the podcast. Yeah, because I mean, he was very proud of himself, because he said before, he said, "I would have lost the plot." He said, "I probably would have given him a dig, or I would have at least been screaming." He
Yeah.
said, "But now," he said, "I'm not saying I stay calm all of the time, because obviously I don't, but nobody does. And the vast majority of boys, if someone throws a scooter at the back of them, are going to respond, whether they're ADHD or not, because like, it's your natural instinct if someone attacks you to go." But like, he recognized that the other child was 11 or 12 or something, and much shorter than him, and so it would not be the
Mhm.
appropriate thing to do. But I was so impressed that he said, "Well, yeah, because when you don't lose your temper, you're in control." He goes, "The other guy was going," and he goes, "He was
Yeah.
puffing and puffing so much he couldn't actually speak. He was so annoyed."
Oh, oh, wow. I mean, credit on you as well, Anne-Marie, because
Oh,
obviously
thank
that's
you.
the work you've been doing with him,
Yeah, well, so he's been
to
coming to
get
me
him to
for
that
about
space.
a year, and his reading and all has improved. And obviously his emotions and everything have improved. But what I was very shocked about is, I said, "Well, let's look at your maths." Because I mean, obviously he's not going to do GCSEs or Leaving Cert because, you know, they just haven't, school has failed him 100%. But to do anything, any trade or anything, you have to have a like a certain level of knowledge. And what I was shocked about was the level of maths was so low. They'd done so little with them. And
Yeah.
he's been
And
in
this is the problem
school
we have, isn't
for
it?
6 years, so his
Yeah.
emotions hadn't improved,
Yeah.
reading hadn't improved. So what were you teaching him during that time?
Yeah.
Like,
And it's because there are so many teachers who don't know how to deliver learning through a multisensory approach. And because they don't know how to do that, so many children are falling through the gap and being failed. And I think one of the things that we really love at Nature Sprout Academy is that all of our learning is experiential, all of it is play-based. Even to the 12-year-olds, there are opportunities that you can use, discovery, practical activities to develop the key skills that you need. Now, I know like within the UK and the Western world, our class sizes are really huge and we have really
they are
rigid
here, yeah.
curriculums that have to be met. I mean, but in Ghana also we have the same issues around, the fact that we're teaching, our teaching is outdated. Our teaching of how we taught 100 years ago, 50 years ago, we're still doing that when we're not keeping up with the
So
development of our children,
no,
and we're not recognizing that actually, we have neurodiverse ways of thinking and being, and all of them are valid and all of them need to be recognized in a learning space. We
yeah.
haven't got quite that, we haven't got there yet, but I think we are further along in there than we were previously, but there's still a huge way to go.
Yeah, I mean, we are, but there is a huge way to go. And I think like lots of teachers are interested, but it's the whole system. Like,
Yeah,
so if the principal's not interested, then the
this
teacher
is it.
individually can't really do anything.
Cannot.
And
Yeah,
then from like when you go up higher, like the whole I mean, Ireland and England would have a very similar education system. It's all based around, we have to do Irish, but apart from that, Irish, English, and maths. I mean, if you're not good at those three in Ireland, well, but most kids in Ireland stay in school till 18, so it's
yeah,
a
yeah.
long road. And for a lot of people, it is a good education system, but it's just not very what's the word? It doesn't
Fit for
embrace
purpose.
difference. I mean, at least in the
Mm.
UK, you can like do dance and you can do music. There's more variety, I think. Whereas that's
I
not
think
even
there was. They've gotten rid of a lot of topics,
happening.
and so it's become actually quite rigid. And what's available for the non-traditional routes, which is what they call it,
Yeah.
is not as varied as it used to be.
Okay.
It's still quite limited. And they have still managed to incorporate such a huge amount of academics into those. So, for example, food technology, um, anyone would think, okay, you know what, if I'm really maths, English, science, if they're not really my strong point, let me do something like food technology, media, dance, for example. In
Or, yeah.
all of those, they have put so much coursework in it, so the practical element of it is only a portion and often a smaller portion. And
Yeah.
so even though you would think that that is an easier route for a student to go to be able to demonstrate their skills and their knowledge and their capability, they've still managed to build in systems into that still hinder, you know, children
Yeah.
where reading and writing may be a challenge for them. And because they're not taught using explicit instructions, they're not given the tools to be able to decode and unpack all of these things in front of them. They're just expected to be able to just get on with it. And I think it does start from the top. Our teacher training system across the world needs to be completely
Oh,
revamped,
absolutely.
because teachers are not being equipped to be able to support the students in front of them.
Yeah.
And
I
it's
mean,
really challenging.
in Ireland, in a 4-year teacher training course, on looking at just dyslexia, they do 4 hours. 4 hours.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, so you can imagine then I would say they learn nothing about autism really, because they'll say, well, no,
no,
we're not equipped with that. So they won't even look at
yeah,
it. Um,
yeah,
And the funny thing is, a few years ago, I mean, I've offered to go into loads of schools free of charge, train their teachers, because if you start the kids off like when they're 4 and 5, when they start school, using practical tools, it works for the whole class, not just the kids who might be
It
just
does. It does. It
it
does.
works for everybody. And I remember
Yeah.
when I was in school, because a lot of the stuff we teach using clay, but I used that when I was 4. I can still remember it. We used to call it mala, which is Irish for plasticine, and everybody
Right.
because it
Yes.
built up your hand muscles and stuff for handwriting.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
we've got rid
Yeah.
of loads of that stuff now in classrooms. Instead, they've
It's so
got stuff
shocking.
all over the walls, like, and
Yeah. It's
it's
crazy.
overwhelming. Whereas before
Yeah.
they used simple materials, but that had more than one purpose. So, you learned
Yes.
how to roll and you learned that helped you with your handwriting, but you learned how to create things in 3D, which if you're more a 3D learner, that works much better for you.
Yes.
But all kids enjoy creative stuff. I mean,
All of them.
my youngest daughter was 10 years younger than her siblings, and so all her friends came after school, to play in my house. And all the parents were always shocked because I would cook with the kids, or we'd have loads of glitter and glue, and they'd go, "Oh, I hate glitter, it makes
Mm,
me mad." I'm going, but like they entertain themselves then. Whereas if you
yeah,
don't
with
do
those.
anything fun, you're like constantly like, "Oh, do you want to do this or do you want?" But like if you just leave them
Yeah.
alone, they're perfectly happy. Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's yeah,
Yeah.
a massive
Yeah, it's amazing, and the thing is, we have the research. The research is there. We know what we need to do. We're just choosing not to. We know the research shows how important it is to give children opportunity, around manipulatives and building their hand muscles, and how that helps when it comes to writing. We know what we need to do. We know how to develop the pre-writing skills. We know how to develop pre-reading skills. But for some reason, we choose not to do it, or we choose to just curtail it to
yeah,
the preschool era. And once they're out of the preschool era, you believe that they don't need it anymore. But if you taught children how to decode letters and sounds as a reading tool, you give them the skill that they can apply to whatever text they come across. But if you're just teaching them how to recognize these words and you're not teaching them how the words come together, and I think this didn't fully occur to me until my daughter was studying. She's a Spanish teacher, and during part of her degree program, she did linguistics. And linguistics blew my mind because, my gosh, why does every teacher should, and every parent, I think, actually everybody should have some level of linguistic input, because once you understand how language is made and you understand that, like, language-based disorders, conditions, whatever title you want to give it, understanding of that is such a key to helping children overcome so many of the learning barriers that they have. So it's like, why don't we emphasize on this more? Why don't we emphasize on the fact that actually a lot of these things are language based? And so let's get about our understanding of language, and let's find better ways of teaching language acquisition, and
yeah,
let's recognize the cultural context of language and how that, can you imagine the revolution that we would create if we had
yeah. I
that as a
mean,
standard?
my kids always chatted a lot, and I think that if kids can't, if their speech isn't good to start off with, then you need to develop their speech before you're trying to teach them to read. I mean, when they
Yeah.
go to school in Ireland at 4 or 5, immediately they've to try and read Irish book and an English book, which in itself
Oh, okay.
is a struggle, like because they're very different sounds. The language
Mm.
is set up completely different. Irish is completely the reverse of English, like so a
Oh,
sentence is backwards, if you know what I mean. So if you'd say you might say in English, "I'm hungry," in Irish you would say, "The hunger is on me," which
ah,
if the child
yeah.
has developed good English skills before they go to school, and and they don't, their speech isn't very fluent, and then somebody's for an hour a day is telling them something different, then it's a muddle, and I
Yeah.
know there's lots of children who speak 2 languages, but that's usually because they have a parent who speaks another language. They're not
Mm.
just being going, okay, we'll go in and learn these verbs, and then the way they teach language is appalling anyway.
It's so, it really is so bad.
I was trying to teach myself Spanish with Duolingo, and it was fine until I got to the bit because I only wanted to listen to it, and I'd be doing it when
Yeah,
I'm, cooking the dinner or something. And then it came to the part
yeah.
where they start learning the verbs and I was going, okay,
Feminine
right
and
now,
masculine
I now,
verbs, like,
yeah, now
ah,
I now need a notebook because I can't retain this while I'm doing something else. But then I have some students staying with me at the moment, Italian students, and they said, "Oh no, Duolingo's terrible. Use something different, Anne-Marie."
yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah.
it is. I
Amazing.
think we just try to. I mean, a lot of schools in Europe, like my niece didn't go to school, so she was 7 in Germany, and in
Yeah,
Holland, they go much later. And
yeah.
but when they leave school, they've got the exact same academic skills. Sometimes they have
Honestly,
more. So
yeah. Very much, very,
if
very
we,
much
if
so.
we spent all those years, just like you said, developing the kids emotionally to function, I mean, that's what I always say. We're not teaching our kids how to function properly in the world.
Yeah, in the
World
world. Yeah,
is very stressful. And
yeah.
as someone said, because our equivalent of A levels is leaving cert, and I was listening to someone the other day, like nobody says when you're 20 or 30 or 40, oh, what did you get in your leaving cert? Nobody cares.
Exactly. Nobody cares.
And
Nobody
it's
cares, but
still
they care
easier to
how you
get it.
made them feel. They
Yeah.
care about the
I
relationship
mean,
you have with them.
my two daughters went to performing arts colleges in the UK, and going back to what you said about the level of academics they've put into it, now my eldest daughter went through school like without any issues, and she did a she was a very academic child. So I mean, she found dance college so easy because the level of content was like much lower than what she had done. But she absolutely adored dance, was her favorite thing. But my younger daughter, the one that homeschooled herself, the level of academics in her course 10 years later was unbelievable. And they both came out with like a
Mm,
diploma for
yeah,
the exact same thing.
yeah,
And
yeah.
but when she showed me and when I read what she wrote, I mean, it was very high level. But most of the kids
Mm,
that she was in college with weren't able to do that because,
mm,
they'd gone to performing arts colleges because they didn't like academics. Both my
mm,
daughters went because it was something that they were passionate about. They loved dancing, they loved moving. My youngest daughter was an elite
mm.
gymnast. But when I saw what she did, I was going, but like this is degree level work, and
Yeah,
you're looking for a job, in the West End or
yeah,
music videos or whatever. Um,
yeah,
what's that got to do with that? Like she'd never
yeah.
done music and all this music theory. She was going, oh my God, but she could learn it. But like you said, there was loads of kids there who really struggled. And my eldest daughter did all of the academic work of one of her friends, one of the boys. I always say, well,
Mm.
she got two diplomas.
She got two.
She got his and hers, but he got a job straight away because he's a boy. But
Yeah,
it just goes to show because he never did a single thing. He used to pay her
yeah,
very badly,
yeah.
but
Yeah, no, I completely get that. Like my youngest, didn't she was homeschooled up until 8. She decided when she was 8, she said, Mum, I want to go to school. So we said, fine. So she went to school. So she didn't learn to read until no, she went to school, I think, when she was 9. She learned to read at 8. Um, but she was on par. When she started school, she was on par with her
yeah.
peers. You couldn't tell that she didn't have formal education. And because I really value the European model of, formal education when they're like 7 plus. They do the same in China, Japan. And because we know from child development that actually in those first 7 years, what they need is experiences, what they need is active learning, and then they can, so they don't lose out on anything. So, in the UK, schools have just gone back and they're going to be assessing the 4-year-olds who are starting reception, formal assessment, at 4.
See,
And it's
we
like,
don't do that.
madness, it's,
They test so much in the UK. Like we just don't have that much testing that they have in the UK. And they
yeah,
have since COVID, they have evolved some of the way that they mark the kids, in the higher levels. But still, I mean, it's kind of it's improving, but at a very small pace. And like what we call like Montessori schools that most all kids go to before they go to school here, and they get it free for 2 years. But the level of content that they're teaching the kids, and when they go to school, like you said, at you call it reception, we call it junior infants. The schools now expect the kids to know all the alphabet, to
Oh
know the
my God.
numbers, and
Yeah. Yeah.
like, but that's
But
your job.
I'm so puzzled by that because you you want them to know the alphabets, the colors, the shapes, and everything, but they can't tell you I'm sad. They can't tell you, they can't say help me. They can't say play with me. They can't say I don't like that. They can't um
And most
they
of the
can't manage
time,
their emotion if they hear no, if they're told no.
yeah, they go,
And I
"Oh,"
think those skills are so much more important than, you know,
but
their
most of
colors
them,
and their
when
shapes and their numbers.
they say they know the alphabet, I know from them coming to me, they don't know the alphabet, they know
They
the
don't know it.
song.
They know how to repeat some sounds.
Yes, they just go, they'll sing the song. And I said, I always go, no,
Yes.
we don't sing the song because like all of the kids, when they get to LMNOP, they all go
It's
LMNO.
just number.
Yeah, they don't know that they're separate letters.
Yeah.
And you get, when I hear kids, the mom's going to the 4-year-olds, oh, go on, tell them you know all your letters, and start singing the song. I go, okay, well,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not commenting, but
Yeah.
she
Or
doesn't.
even the difference between counting, parents will be like, oh, they can count to 10, they can count to 20. And again, they've learned these sounds and they're repeating it. But actually, if you give them a quantity in front of them, they couldn't tell you what a
How
quantity
many?
of one is, what a quantity of two is. They couldn't tell you out of context what those numbers are. They don't recognize what those
No,
numbers
because
are.
yeah, because they haven't connected it to something physical. They
Yes.
haven't said, okay,
Yeah.
there's two trees or, whatever, or
Yes.
there's two
Yeah.
balls. And like, that's a lot of what I would do during the maths program. We'd start like way back at the very basics of like,
Mm,
counting. Because when I ask kids, like,
yes.
can you count? Yeah. But I'm amazed even kids of 10, like they go, oh yeah, I can count. I'm really good, blah, blah, blah. And then I say, how far can you count? Oh, I've never counted past 100. And I just go, what do you think comes
Yeah.
next? Oh, I'm not sure. Because,
Yeah. Yeah. Because those are the parameters that have been put in
yeah,
terms of like assessment, because you're not teaching, you're teaching so they can remember this information, but you're not
yeah,
teaching so they know and understand this
understand this. Yeah.
information and how to use it in life. And that's part of the problem. And that's why I do love the Montessori curriculum, because it's very much about practical living and
The,
learning skills
I
for
mean,
life.
when my daughter was doing Pythagoras' theorem when she was 4 or 5, like nobody said it was Pythagoras' theorem, it
Yeah.
was just a piece of equipment to the kids. And
Hmm.
they could add in thousands. And the strange thing about Montessori is they start at big numbers and then work down to small numbers. But
Mm,
like if you looked
mm,
at the book that they use, like someone was going, oh, but my child is 10 and she hasn't done that. And I was going, yeah, but Montessori is completely different.
yeah. Yeah.
It's not about just pouring information in. It's, like you
Yes.
said,
Yes.
developing more rounded human beings. I remember that was
Yes.
our school motto. I went to a convent and I can't remember what it was or something in Latin, but it was translated into English was we develop all-rounded human beings.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It has to be. It has to be. So I think one of the things that we're really proud of at Nature Sprout Academy is looking at how do we develop an all-rounded child who is neurodivergent, who has significant barriers around social communication, um, how do we do that? And the way we do that is just to look at them as a whole being and look at their character, their personality, their engagement with the world around them. And the way to do that is just to give them the freedom to be, the freedom to be outside, running,
Oh
climbing,
yeah.
jumping, pouring, scooping, molding, stretching, pegging, all of these things, they're all experiences to just build who they are, and kind of really trying not to obsess about um things, information,
Yeah.
but actually looking at like, well, so what, what's the point in a child learning, all the shapes and the numbers and the letters if they can't express a basic need, they can't say yes or no, you know, they can't share, and their age, they're developmentally, they're of an age that they should have an awareness of sharing, but they can't because they don't have that space. But
Yeah.
even when I think about like dyslexia support, like we've done a lot of awareness raising of dyslexia in Ghana, getting people to understand that it's not just about reading and writing.
Oh, I mean, like that, that's always what I say, and it's got nothing to do with reading and writing. It's the way that you just learn information. And whenever anyone comes to me, I always say that to them. I always go, you know, dyslexia is just a different way of learning. Schools just don't teach that way, unfortunately. They just
Yes,
teach with words and
unfortunately, yeah.
books, and that's not the way that your brain learns best.
Mm,
I said so, and most kids, even once you actually tell them that, they look at themselves differently, and
mm,
and then once there's a boost in self-esteem, kids can learn better. Where if they're
yeah,
always going, "Oh, yeah." And my sister is dyslexic. She went back to college and she just qualified as a nurse. But she went to art college
amazing.
when she was young. But she said she did love art, but she felt in school that it was presented to her as the
It's the
only,
only option.
even
Yeah.
though she actually did very well in school, but she felt like she was pushed that way. And so she wanted to do the
Mm,
nursing, one, because she loves people and she wanted to be a nurse, but two,
mm,
to prove to people that, I can do something academic. And she actually was
mm,
one of the
mm.
top in the class because as an adult, she said she knew she had to keep on top of the work. So when the
Right.
teenagers were like going, oh, going out drinking and whatever, I'll do that next week. She said I didn't have that option because the workload
Mm,
would be too big then.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I,
yeah.
because as an adult, you develop the skills that you miss out on as a child if
Yes.
you've, gone through an education system that doesn't suit you. Anyway,
Yes.
I better let you go, Justina, because I'm sure you have lots to do. I talk a lot.
Mhm. Yeah, same socially. It's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for having
It
me.
has. I'm
I've
delighted.
really
And
enjoyed
if
speaking
I
to
ever
you.
get to Ghana, I'll definitely go look at your school. I think
Please do. We would be so happy to have you. So please, please do let
it,
us know.
it looks amazing. I think, gosh, if anyone who hasn't seen it needs to go look at it. I think it's the future of education, I think for all kids. Um, because we all need to develop the creative side to our brain because like
Yeah,
the world is moving so fast.
yeah.
And like there's so many issues in the world that only creative people will come up with the solutions. So
Yes.
we
Yes.
need to
I
value
totally
that.
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where can people find information about you, Justina?
Yeah. So our website is www.nsa.edu.gh, and
Mhm.
on social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, we are Nature Sprout Academy.
Very good. And if anyone is looking for information about me, you can find me. My website is theparagraphchallenge.com, or you can find me on all social media platforms as Anne-Marie Beggs. So it's great chatting to you, Justina, and I'm sure everybody listening is going off to find out about the work that you and the other people are doing.
Awesome.
Um, I
Awesome.
mean, it's because when my son finished primary school, my daughter had done started in the Montessori, so I thought, oh, I need to find a Montessori secondary school, and there is some in the US, but not in Ireland.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, because I've actually not heard of any in the UK either.
No, I only found one in the USA, and I think that's why a lot of people homeschool like you did, and I did. Well, my daughter did it herself, but I did support her. But homeschooling is huge in Ireland at the moment.
Mm,
Like, because people, want to support their children differently. So
yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
it was fantastic conversation, Justina, and thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for in joining me. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. You take care. Have a great week.